Hey, class, we are in week 6, chapter 8 of our book, John Maxwell. Everyone communicates, few connect. It's a really important book. This chapter, I'm really excited about this. Chapter 8, 7 ways to be interesting. 7 ways to be interesting. Look, as a leader, it's not just important that it's not just important that you take the position. You've got to be an interesting person. As a leader, you have already found, or you will find, that you will spend the majority of your time in front of people. Almost everything I do in life at this stage of the game, right? I'm edging in. I got a birthday coming up here. I'm edging into my mid 40s here. I'm going to be 44. And I think I've built a pretty decent life. I'm still moving forward, but I've got a lot of different, whether it's boards or whether it's teaching here at Point Loma or whether it's the consulting and training that I do. I spend a lot of time in front of people. And I talk about leadership a lot of times. And there are some aspects of my life, especially with some of the boards I'm on, that I'm in a position now where I'm actually chairing these boards. I'm a vice chair of one board, chair of 2 different boards. I'm getting ready to become a chair. Anyway, I say all that to say this. I'm spending a lot of time in front of people. And one of the things that you will find too in your journey, the more your influence grows, the more that you're going to be spending more time in front of people, the more that you're going to be connecting. You've got to be interesting. You've got to say interesting things. You've got to learn how to say in interesting ways. You cannot make it about yourself. You've got to make it, about the people in front of you. That's something that I've stressed over and over. If you get nothing else from these videos, take this one thing away. Never make it about yourself. If you can do that, you don't even have to have all the charisma and all the being interesting and all that kind of stuff. Just don't make it about you. That's what gets so many leaders in trouble. But let's dive in this week. It's important that you're interesting, okay? Here's what John Maxwell says. He says, after giving thousands of speeches, that's not me. I've given a few in my lifetime. I'm not getting 1,000. After giving thousands of speeches and communicating for decades, I've learned some things about how to be interesting to others and make communication an experience everyone enjoys. And I think that's key. Everyone in the room, as much as you can, needs to enjoy what you're bringing to the table. I'm going to present to you the best of what I've learned. And so then he goes on and he says it. So I'm not going to read through everything, but I am going to give these ways because I think that they're important. I want to give you the 7 ways to be interesting. And then I want you to think for yourself, right? As you're hearing these different ways, what's one way that you can take from this? We need to be working on all 7, but what's something that you could work on even right now to make yourself more interesting in the workplace? So here's number 1 is take responsibility for your leaders. John Maxwell says, I often hear presenters talk about bad audiences that they've spoken to. Usually they are describing people who don't respond favorably to their speeches. And then he says, I think they've got it wrong. In general, there are no bad audiences, only bad speakers. If the audience is asleep, somebody needs to go on stage and wake up the speaker. Now, I would disagree with him on that. I've done my fair share of speaking, and I've had in my lifetime, and I think I'm a pretty reflective guy. When I get off a platform or I get done speaking and it doesn't go well, I'm the first one to say, okay, what do I need to change up in there? But I do think sometimes you can walk into audiences that can be a little bit cantankerous, right? Southern California, for instance, I've actually heard people say this when they're from other parts of the country. They give talks in other places, and then they come here and give a talk. It's just we just are different here in Southern California. We're not impressed with very much. I mean, we live right down the street from Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Julie Roberts. I'm dating myself because those are all the movie stars of my days. We live near the beaches and the sun, and we've got beautiful everything. It's just everything's beautiful here in Southern California. Most things, maybe not everything, but you get what I'm saying. And so we're just not impressed. So when people come from from a different part of the world or a different part of the country and they speak to us, it's not that impressive to us. And I've actually had people say it's kind of frustrating to go to Southern California because the crowds just don't get as excited about things, right? Now, unless you're talking about sports and you're in the Los Angeles region, right, and you've got the LA Lakers, you got the LA Dodgers, that's a whole nother ballgame. I love going to Lakers games, love going to LA Dodgers games. That's a whole nother ballgame. But for speakers, it's a little bit different. So I would disagree a little bit with John Maxwell and say, it is. But the point he's trying to make is as speakers and as leaders, we can't be blaming our people. Like when we walk out of a meeting and no one has been engaged with what we're trying to do and we're sitting there blaming all of them, that, we've done a poor job of communicating. We've done a poor job of planning the meeting, right? So it's our job to make sure that we're doing that. So what he's saying here is to take responsibility for your listeners. And here's how I would do that, right? Is you've got to get into the seat of your listener. You've got to figure out what it is that they want. We've talked about this a lot. When you come into a room, you've got to figure out, you got to understand that every single person in front of you, they're in it for themselves. They have that job because they have bills to pay. They have that job because they have vacations that they're trying to make. They're sitting there. Yes, they appreciate the organization, but really when it comes down to it, they're doing it because of survival. So we have to be open to that, and we have to understand that, okay? So take responsibility for your listeners. Number two, communicate in their world, okay? Communicate if their world. If you want to get your message across, John Maxwell says you have to learn how to communicate in someone else's world. Connecting with others requires a skill. Too often, speakers are unwilling or unable to get out of their own world and say things from their perspective, and say things from the perspective of their listener. And when that happens, not only is it unlikely that a connection will develop, but it actually creates distance between a speaker and a listener. Right. So, this is one thing that I have too in my world. There are people that kind of travel around and they do these canned talks. So they have a certain talk they give and they just walk around and they give the same talk over and over and over and over again. And I think the dangerous part about that is the fact that they're walking into different rooms every single time, right? You've got to know you've got to know who you're talking to. You've got to know how to get on their level. When I'm speaking to you, bachelor students at Point Loma Nazarene University, it's different than like a few weeks ago. I was asked to go over and speak to some students at Southwestern College, and it was for the Emoji Club. So it was primarily black students, and they had some Latino students as well. I'm Afro-Latino, so that resonates with me a great deal. And I was able to go over there and speak to them, and it was a different kind of a room, and they had pizza and all kinds of stuff going in. I'm speaking different to them than I am to you than when I go speak at my church, right, next week, and I give a message there, than when I fly up to Denver here in just a few weeks, and I go give a talk to a bunch of supervisors who run the court systems up there, right? It's all these are different ways, right? And if I don't learn that and I don't understand that, and I go in and I talk to these supervisors, these court supervisors, highly educated people up in Denver, Colorado, and I talk to them the same way I talk to that Umoja Club that's filled with freshmen and sophomores. Look, I'm not going to be hired, in either place ever. I'm not going to be asked to come back ever again. And the same goes for you as well. You've got to understand the different worlds that you're in, and you've got to be able to communicate with people in different worlds. I think the greatest kind of person, and I've actually met some of these people in my lifetime, but they're rare to meet, is the person who can speak to kings and speak to homeless people in the same exact day and be able to connect with both of them. That should be the goal for you. That should be the goal for you. That if in one day you're able to talk with a CEO, and in that same day you're able to talk to a homeless person, and in both of those you walk away with the connection made, you walk away having learned something deeper about life, then you know you've got the job done. That's what we need to be doing. Number three is this. If you want to be interesting, okay, capture people's attention from the start. Management consultant Myrna Moravsky quipped, people have remote controls in their heads these days. Okay. If you don't catch their interest, they just click you off, right? And that's just very true. People will turn you off, and really it's just in a matter of minutes. And here's what I find really turns people off. If you don't make it about them. You've got to make it about them. Even say, if you listen to great speakers, they say the word you a lot. You, because they understand they're talking to the people and they're trying to make it about them, right? So, and the same thing as a leader. If you're running a meeting, you've got to involve the people in front of you, right? If you're just doing it all by yourself and it's all about you, you're not going to have the success that you want to have, okay? And then the book gives a lot of different examples. I'm not going to necessarily go into do that, but you've got to start. You've got to capture people's attention from the start, and you can do that, right? So give some examples. Start with a comment about the situation or setting. That's always a good one. You walk in, oh man, it's a rainy day today. Did everybody make it into the meeting okay? Or if you're speaking in front of a group of people, man, it's raining outside today. And if I'm ever traveling and I say that, and I'm from San Diego, so I'm not used to seeing this, right? But this is beautiful up here, right? And I actually do like the rain. You can introduce yourself. I like this one. It says here, relax. Chill, right? John Maxwell's very good at this. I love to watch him speak because it's just like he just gets up there and you can tell he's been doing it a long time. Begin with humor. I don't typically do that because I'm not a very funny person. You've probably seen it in these videos. I have a slight stutter. I used to stutter a great deal when I was a kid. If you told me I was going to be a professor and a speaker and a talker for a living, I probably would have cussed you out and told you there's not a chance that's ever going to happen. But so anyway, I've learned from myself because of my stutter. it gets in the way of trying to be funny. So I've learned not, for me, beginning with humor is not going to be good because I'll stutter on the I don't know what is it, the main line you're supposed to say or the catch line or the catchphrase or whatever. I'll stutter on that and I'll mess up the entire joke. I've done it before, so I've learned for me. But you might want to use humor that might create a sense of anticipation, right? Tell them what they're going to learn. Like, hey, if you stick this out, right, one of the things we're going to talk about, and you're getting ready to learn something great. You're getting ready to learn something that's going to be life changing for you. That creates that sense of of anticipation. So again, there are a lot of different videos out there, a lot of different ways that you can figure out how do you capture their attention. But that's really important as a leader to really get in there and capture their attention right away. Number 4, activate your audience. Tony Robbins, if you've ever seen anything that he's done, he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal at this, right? Really getting the audience engaged, right? Ask questions. You got to get people moving. Ask people to interact, right? So these are some skills that if we were in an in-person class, we would definitely do something like this. We'd have a lot of questions. We'd be doing a lot of dialoguing back and forth. We may not be doing a lot of moving around, but we'd have some interaction between you guys, right? In the course. So all that's important as well. Number 5, say it so that it sticks. And he gives some examples. Give me liberty or give me death. I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. A government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's Abraham Lincoln. Never, never, never give up. Winston Churchill. You've all probably heard the John F. Kennedy quote. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So these are quotes that people, the rest of history, they'll go down because of that, something that they said. If what you're saying, if you're giving a talk to somebody, or even if you're running a meeting and there's one thing you want them to walk away with, repeat that thing over and over again. We talked already about the importance of repetition. And number 6, be visual. Okay, but I would say this: don't be too visual. I've seen people go way overboard with this, and they almost treat their audiences, they treat the crowd in front of them almost like they're a bunch of little kids, right? Unless you're dealing with little kids, don't treat your audiences, especially adult learners, like little kids, right? But John Maxwell says this: most people learn visually. And in our current age of television, movies, YouTube, and other forms of visual communication, what people see has become increasingly important. There was a time when groups of people would sit around a radio and listen for news and entertainment, but those days are gone. So again, it's really important if you're giving a talk that you've got to be visual. And then number 7 is simply this: tell stories. And this goes back to what I said in the last video, that when we're thinking about like prime examples of people who communicated well and did it well, Jesus, right, was an incredible example. Just go back and read the New Testament. Go back and read the Gospels and read the stories that he shares. He always has a great lesson, but he shares those lessons by sharing a story. And so leaders, as much as you can share stories, that's going to be really great for you as you're walking through. Now, I'm not much of a storyteller, and so I would tell you, don't go overboard with this. There's a guy that I know who's a pastor, and he's phenomenal at what he does. He is so incredible at what he does. He's not necessarily my personal favorite. I have a lot of friends who like him, but he's not necessarily my personal favorite, because he'll spend 15 to 20 minutes telling a story, and I'm just like, man, get to the point. Tell me the 7 things I need to learn, right? I learn kind of the way I'm teaching you, right? But people really resonate with stories. And if you're going to tell a story about yourself, don't make yourself the hero in the story. We talked about that already in the past couple of weeks. Always make your audience, always make the people in the room, make them the hero of the story. You're in the role of the guide. Okay, that's really important for you to understand. But tell stories. Okay, so here's the question I have for you this week. Okay, so now we just talked about 7 ways to be interesting. What is the 3rd way to be interesting? What is the 3rd way to be interesting? And how would you do this if you were leading a meeting? Okay, so I want you to remember that. We already talked about this. So if you got to go back and rewind this, find the 3rd way to be interesting, and how would you do this if you were leading a meeting? I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.